Hey gang, we are in Texas on a cold and dreary afternoon. We're just about 4 miles south of Giddings, Texas in Lee County, and we're going to visit the grave of a brave woman, pioneers. It's a very sad story. I'm going to give you a warning. This is a very brutal story. Comanche attack and massacre of an entire family, and it's unbelievable how this story unfolds. Unbelievable bravery, risk-taking. I mean, as I have said before, it went both ways. Comanche were here, and the whites were encroaching, and you know, not only would the whites be massacred, but you know, you go into here, South Dakota, the Dakotas, Wyoming, the Sioux. It went both ways. But this story is particularly bad. Her name was Nancy Margaret Gocher, and her husband was James Gocher. Came here in 1835. They settled here. They were really true pioneers, the first ones. Not here, not where we're going to see where the grave is, but they were in Bastrop County, and they actually opened the first trail to Stephen Austin's new colony, Austin, which is known, I think until recently, as Gocher's Trace. So they settled here, came from Alabama, and set up the homestead here. They had children, everything was great. And I think it was 1836, the next year. They hadn't been here more than a year, got the homestead set up, and boy, taking a risk. There was nothing here but buffalo and wolves, and of course the Comanche. So you talk about risk if you're discovered. So it was one fine day, and James went out with his son-in-law. His last name was Crawford, and one of his very young, you know, the kids were very, very small and babies, and one of the small boys was with, and they went out, gosh, it was probably half mile away on a wood cutting mission, and they didn't bring their guns with. They left all the guns in the cabin with the family, with Mom, with Nancy, and with Nancy there at the house was children, and also her eldest daughter. Her name was Jane, and she was married to, it was Jane Crawford, Jane Gocher Crawford, and she was married to the son-in-law Crawford, who was out getting the wood. Well, the men were away. They were within earshot, and from two different directions. Now again, this didn't happen here. They're buried here on private property, and there's a stair we're able to go legally. And anyone can come here. It's pretty cool what they did. I'll show you. But in Bastrop County, where this happened, they were in the homestead. I said the men were away, and there was a Comanche raiding party and group that assembled that came, and then they split up into two separate forces, and they converged and surrounded the cabin. Yeah, I know. We're among the cows and the calves. All right, well, let's, without further ado, let's walk. It's a short walk to the grave site, and I'll give you a little look around here on this road, and it seems like you could come here, anyone can come here. Of course, it's private property, so we're just going to cross this stair, which is put in here for that reason, for folks like us who just want to pay respects and visit the grave, which we will do. So yeah, they came in and they surrounded the house. As they approached the house, there was one of the two of the children, little brother and little sister, out playing like you would imagine right here, and they were afraid that they were going to scream, of course, so they just killed them both. They put a steel spear right through the little boy. I don't know how old he was, probably 3 or 4, who knows, maybe 5, and they scalped the little girl. Hopefully after they had killed her. Beautiful little hollow here. Then they approached and circled the house. Of course, Nancy was inside with Jane and the little kids. And all the guns were loaded, so they approached the door, and she opened the door and she started shooting. And she killed maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of them. Well, this really made them mad. Of course, and they started shooting arrows. The open door, she's shooting. And it didn't take very long, and she was a walking pincushion of arrows. But she was still shooting. Finally, one of the warriors just took his rifle and shot her in the head. She fell backward into the house. Now, one of the little boys, gosh, he was probably 4 or 5 years old, ran around the back of the house, and he ran into a big warrior who picked him up and was shaking him so hard he almost passed out. But the little guy bit his thumb and he wouldn't let go. So the warrior grabbed the ramrod from his gun, started beating the boy, while all the other men, Comanche, were laughing. He finally got the little guy to let go, and that was it for him. Little guy. Another little boy crawled out of the house, wounded with arrows. He escaped only to lie on a stone in the tree line and die there. So there's Jane Crawford inside. She had her little baby. I think there was one other child. And by the way, going back to the one other child, and they took them prisoner. And you know what it's like. Now, when this was all going down, this was all happening, the men, of course, heard the gunshots and all the ruckus, and they came. They had no guns. But what are you going to do? They didn't think maybe it was they didn't know what was going on, and maybe it was just a few Comanche, and they could sneak in, and they knew their only chance was to get in the house to get those guns, and they didn't make it because they were spotted and they were cut down. So basically, the entire family, except for Jane Crawford, mom, the baby, and I think there was one other girl, little girl, and they were taken hostage. And you know, they would take them hostage so they could use them as slaves and then barter and trade. Use them as trade. So, very sad story. So what happened? What happened after that? Well, it gets worse. Jane Crawford is carrying the baby, and they ended up near a river, and one of the Comanche grabbed the baby right out of her hands, and the others watched as he just threw it, and they were by the river, and there was like a raging river, and there was kind of an eddy, a smooth spot, and he threw it. He just like flung it in the freezing river. Of course, she screams and goes after it, and he snatches it back from Jane, and he throws it back in. This goes on 2 or 3 times, and all the other guys, they're like laughing. So he's going to kill it. He's going to kill the baby and maybe bash it into a tree. And she takes this big log and she smashes him over the head. She smashes him over the head and knocks him down. And the Braves, the rest, they're all like laughing. They're like, good job, good show. They were impressed with her bravery. So they actually gave the baby back. The baby lived. you know, they would survive this ordeal because they finally got traded for blankets and calico and all kinds of things, and they were bartered away. So, yeah, they survived. Can you imagine the ordeal? So yeah, it was a trader who really saved them. After about 2 years, the trading agent got them out, and he made arrangements for them to be escorted back to Texas, here to Texas, by a man named Charles Spaulding. And during the trip, I guess they got attached. The young mother Crawford, Jane Crawford, and Charles Spaulding would end up getting married. He had kids already. They would get married. Sadly, Jane lived only to about 38 or 39. She died in 1851. Don't know where she's buried, but her children and their children, they lived on. They would live out their lives there with their descendants at that homestead, at that same homestead. And of course, here you see the marker, which is really neat. 1936, I can see there, state of Texas. And you'll see these here. That's what's neat about this state, Lone Star State, is they take great pride in their history. And you'll see these in many places. So look at that. Here's where they are. 5 members with Dad. So let's read the inscription. In this grave rests James Goucher. And that's how it's pronounced, I guess, not Goucher, Goucher. Done some checking on that. James Goucher and 5 members of his family murdered by Indians November 26, 1836. With the true pioneering spirit, he had opened the first road from San Felipe to the settlements on the Colorado, known for many years as Goucher's Trace. There it is. There it is. Well, yes. Nancy Margaret is here with the kids, with James, all wiped out. So very sad. So very sad. Brave people they were. They are the people that opened the path, opened the door for other settlers to come here and settle the area to what it is, all the way to what it is today. So hopefully resting in peace, a good people, the Goucher family. All right, that's it. That's it from this area. I'm going to be heading to similar pioneering Western story next, and I'll see you on the next one.